Hi there, I'm Linda Nelson with Ancient Earth Pigments. I'm here today to demonstrate for you how to make 3 different types of paint out of one pigment, a 3-in-1 demo. Thank you very much. See you in a minute. Today we're doing alizarin crimson, our inventory number PAR13, and I'm going to make sure that all of my little storage containers are properly labeled ahead of time, because these will need to dry and I don't want to pick them up and spill the contents. So what I'm going to start with first is doing the watercolor. As you can see, I set all of my supplies out ahead of time so I wouldn't have to worry about them. That's a lot of pigment. Maybe I don't need quite that much. How about that much? And it's very, very economical to have dry pigment and turn it into various mediums. So what I'm going to start with now is the watercolor medium. This is distilled water. And then I'm going to use gum arabic. Now, our gum arabic comes as a dry powder. You can buy it in a larger tub if you wish. So I'm going to start slowly from the edge. It's kind of the way you would do as if you were making pasta. I'm going to gently use the muller to mix that in. And I'm using the muller today instead of using the palette knife. And the reason being is that I know that I'm going to be doing a larger amount. And you see some pigments, the liquids will want to bead and roll off, which is why I'm doing it gradually. And alizarin crimson is known for being a little bit, needing a little bit mulling time. So in general, I would say that most of our pigments, majority of our pigments, just need about 5 minutes. But alizarin is known to need more, particularly if you're doing oils. Because you see how it's a bit resistant. You want to be able to really disperse the dry pigment into the oil. In this case, we're also working on getting all that dry pigment into the mixture. And this would be a good time to have some music in the studio because it's pretty meditative. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take half of this mixture and I'm going to reserve it for the gouache. Actually less than half. I don't need that much chroma, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. And you'll take a look over here at my paint palette. I don't typically use reds in my landscape painting, but they are very valuable for mixing other colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small small container for my landscape set. Now I'm going to do the demonstration of making gouache. So you see the alizarin crimson that I just did into watercolor. I've left that wet. Now I'm going to take chalk whiting and I'm going to put chalk whiting into that pigment and we will have gouache. Slowly adding the dry to the wet ingredients because I want to maintain the smoothness of the paint. And you'll see the chalk whiting adds opacity and lightens the value. So the alizarin crimson is not nearly so dark. But at the same time, I don't want to lose too much of that rich color. So I'm not adding too much white. And you see I'm sort of gradually doing this because I don't want it to become too pinky. Safely add the rest of this in. It's looking good. And I think I will send the muller around. Not only do I have more of the alizarin crimson on the muller, but it'll help pick up some off of the mixing plate here. And I just want to be sure that it's really smooth. This is very smooth. I can feel that it's very, very smooth. Almost no grinding sound at all. Go ahead and scrape everything down. Get as much pigment as I can. And there is going to be some waste. We can't get away from that. But that's partly why we're doing a big batch. When you do small batches, of course you're going to end up with more waste as you go. Because every time you have to clean your tools. For those who want to, We do have aluminum tubes for holding your paint if you prefer to keep your paint wet in a tube. And that's what the oil painters will be doing. But the watercolorists can also be, and the gouache painters can obviously be using tubes. That's great. Good body, nice and smooth, and I can see that it's quite a bit more opaque than the watercolor. So I'm putting it into a labeled tin, so that way I know exactly what's there when I'm using it to paint with. Oops. Preparing to do egg tempera now. I have all my supplies in front of me. I have distilled water, I have gum arabic, egg yolk, and when I make up my gum arabic, I like to put in a dab of honey. That's both as a preservative to keep mold from growing, and also it helps with a bit of adhesion. So last night when I made the gum arabic, I went ahead and put a tiny dab in there just to help keep that nice and mold free. I will keep it in the refrigerator, however. So I've put a drop of water here. I'm going to give it another drop of water, distilled water. Then I'm going to get a tiny bit of egg yolk. And I'm using a clean spoon so I'm not contaminating. Couple drops there, and then a little bit of alizarin crimson. This is number PAR 13 in our inventory, and I don't need a lot because I know that I only want to make as much paint as I think I'm going to use when I am painting today. And I'm using the palette knife to help me incorporate the wet ingredients with the dry ingredients. Very much as you would when you were baking. I see that I've got some dry pigment on the back of the palette knife, so I'll give it a couple drops of gum arabic, another drop of egg yolk, and a tiny bit more water. I have a limited number of these little mini Muller kits available because at the moment I need to find a new supplier to make the little Mullers for me. So that looks good. I think I've got all the dry ingredients mixed in. Let's see. Now I'm going to take the mini Muller and again, as with the larger watercolor mixture I did, I just want to make sure that everything is dispersed smoothly into the dry pigment. And I don't need much force. I want to be gentle here. That's nice and smooth. I can feel it underneath the palette knife and the Muller both. Now, I would store this in a plastic palette today if I had it available, but I have mislaid it in the studio, so I will just leave it as is right now, and I will try to get a surface to paint on. Thank you very much. I'll be back in a few.